Hey everyone, Genome here, coming at you with the next episode in my Hack and or Slash series. The series where I take a look back at horror franchises of old and see if they're worthy of both story and song. So, for those of you who've been following, I've been reviewing the entire Nightmare on Elm Street series, starting from the original, and I've worked my way up to its final iteration, as it were. It's been a long road, and to some varying degrees, somewhat enjoyable, and some others a little less so. So, we are down to, I say this a lot, but we're down to maybe the most controversial of all of the movies and maybe the most abjectly hated by the horror community. That's a tough call there. There are some advocates of it, and there's probably many more detractors. But let's get into the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street remake and see if it's worthy of the hate, to quote Horror Gamer, or to see if there's actually some decent filmmaking to be had here. So, once again, this is from 2010, and it's basically a reimagining of the very first Nightmare on Elm Street, right? It's just a reboot, a rehash, and nothing too amazing is happening here that's different, but they do try to throw some different stuff at you. This is directed by Samuel Bayer, and Bob Shea is an executive producer, at least listed, so who knows how much, say they had and all that, but don't forget Michael Bay's in this also so take that for what it's worth. But I'm going to give a quick plot synopsis, and then we'll get on to some pros and cons, and then I'll give a final overall rating. So, this movie takes place in more modern day, as the original did, right? Just basically, a group of teens starts having nightmares. They slowly realize that the protagonist is Freddy Krueger, and then a final confrontation happens. Synopsis over. Okay, let's go a little bit more into it than that. We actually let off with a pretty cool scene in a diner. It's kind of creepy. And fairly effective. This is a great way of showing that Freddy maybe is a little more serious in this one and a little more to the point, because he goes right for the guy. And then finally, this guy who knows a couple of the final girls and other final teens, he apparently knows him. He's hanging out in there. He's trying to stay awake. He's having issues. He has a little bit of exposition, and then he kind of offs himself, but he offs himself because Freddy does it to him. Interesting, cool-looking scene, by the way, and it's a good way to break into a title sequence. So, okay, so we've let off from in the first 2 minutes of the movie that the dreams can kill you. But anyone that's watching this movie knows that. So it's just kind of, I guess they have to pay logical fan service. I don't know. But anyway, so we go on to the first red herring of the movie. It's funny because when when she first comes into the diner, Chris, who's played by Katie Cassidy, talks to the final girl, Nancy, played by Rooney Mara, right? And they call each other by first names. She's like, oh, hi, Chris. And then she's like, oh, hi, Nancy. I'm looking for my boyfriend. This, using complete names, like friends never talk that way, but you have to establish who they are. But maybe the filmmakers in this one were trying to throw people off and think things will be different in the original, because, Tina in the first one basically had most of the show for the first 20 minutes thinking, fooling the audience thinking she'd be the final girl, and it wasn't her at all, and then she gets killed. Well, in this one, they changed her name to Chris, so maybe that is just enough to throw people, right? So basically the first, I'd say, 20 minutes or so of the movie kind of revolves around her. First things first, if she's supposed to be a high schooler, no offense to her at all, but she does not look young enough to be a high schooler. I mean, and I've seen her in other stuff, so it's kind of hard to suspend disbelief. I remember her from Supernatural, like some of the mid-seasons or whatever. But she seems like she likes playing this part, at least. She's trying.
You have nothing to worry about. This won't hurt. One little bit.
So that's more than can be said to a lot of people, or regarding a lot of people in this film. But anyway, we go through some trials and tribulations with her. She is the brunt of most of the nightmare sequences, at least the longer ones in this movie. And Freddy kind of is really playing a game with her.
I was just petting him.
While he does seem serious most of the time in this movie, in this first one, he definitely builds towards something. So I wonder if he's gaining power in this portion, building fear to elevate his strength, even though later on in the movie he says it's memories that make him stronger. So that's an interesting thing. I would think it's fear. Whatever. They do change something. So, long story short, we recreate the iconic scene of Tina's death from the original, and it becomes a far less effective CGI-drenched affair, but it's there. So red herring is gone. And now we move on to the rest of the teens, The next one to bite it is, I want to say, one of the better teens. Okay, let me say this. I'm using the word teens loosely. The only two people, as far as the teens in this movie, who really seem to be trying are Thomas Dekker, who plays Jesse, and Katie Cassidy, who plays Chris. And they're the first two to bite it. Jesse does seem terrified in a few spots, and he does seem kind of ragged, and looks like he's having, he's been trying to stay awake for a couple of days, and so yeah, he's got at least a little bit emoting going on compared to everyone else. But once again, pros and cons. We'll get that to the end. So it's a recreation kind of the jailhouse scene, but all the kills and recreations here are quite different than their original iterations. That's good. You don't need carbon copies of every kill. That's fine. His kill is kind of inventive, and it also shows Freddy's really kind of sadistic nature in this movie.
Why are you screaming? I haven't even cut you yet.
Yeah, he's toying with his food again. So, and it's not, like, Freddy has humor again in this, and we'll get on to more of that later, but it's not nearly as rampant and prevalent as it is in basically Nightmares 3 through whatever. It's a little more dark and a little grim, but he does devolve as this movie goes on. So once again, more on that later. So there's lots of stuff going on in between, lots of happenstance, lots of the kids investigating Scooby-Doo style on what's going on here, who this Freddy Krueger guy is. Apparently they all have ties from an orphanage. That's a new one. Where Freddy was a caretaker, and as we all know, he was a child. Now it looks like he was a child molester, more than child murderer, but he has devolved into child torture from what we're seeing. Very disquieting and uncomfortable and completely unnecessary. But okay, that's where they went the direction with it. And they even actually try to throw another red herring at you, like that Freddy might have been innocent, and then the parents still burned him alive. But
what?
Que sera, sera. But yeah, so they're talking, they discover this thing called micro naps. Basically, they've stayed awake too long and the body starts shutting down involuntarily, and then you can start dreaming while you're walking around, sitting around, not technically asleep, but you are asleep. And if you stay awake too long, you go into a coma, right? And then you'll be his victim forever. But so yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and then there's a lot of kind of run up to the final showdown. And I know that sounds kind of generic, but it is. A lot of this seems like filler, a lot of near misses and scares and almost has. It's just kind of meandering back and forth until we get to the ending. And once again, this ending is taken mostly from the original, but there is a couple of differences here. Like, Freddy is killed in the real world, kind of like via Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy's dead, to be honest with you. And it just moves faster, and the final fight is much better than the original. There's none of that Home Alone nonsense, and Freddy's not a bumbling buffoon. He's still kind of on top of things. He just turns his back at the wrong time, and then our final girl gets the coup de grace, as it were. And, that is that until we're treated to the obligatory Freddy maybe not dead scene, of course, and we end on a screaming note. Very popular with this this era of horror filmmaking, right? Ending on a scream.
I'm just glad you're safe.
And that's, in a nutshell, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010 remake, right? More of the same of the original, but they did try to differentiate some things. So let's get into some pros and cons real fast. I didn't mention the very main pro when it comes to this movie, and that is the performance of Jackie Earl Haley as Freddy Krueger.
Oh, God. No. Just me.
A lot of people will hate on this movie unnecessarily just because it's not Robert Englund. Well, you know, the guy can't play Freddy forever. He wants to play something different. You know, he's getting older now. He just didn't want the role. So, you know, Jackie was in a no-win situation with some fans. Some fans just can't turn off the hate wagon long enough to even appreciate his performance. I think his performance was pretty good. He was much better, though, before he got jokey. Toward the last, especially the last third of the movie, maybe in the last half, he turned into kind of a Joker again. And while it was a little bit darker and less ha-ha and more, oh, that's kind of cringe, you know, is in, like, scare-inducing a little bit, it's still off-putting. He still has to put out that stupid one-liner about the wet dream, you know? It's like, that doesn't need to be in this movie.
How's this for a wet dream?
You know, just pay homage to the first one. You don't have to go through some of the greatest hits of the other ones, you know. But when he's not joking around and he looks deadly earnest, he's very good. It's just, like I said, some people cannot get over the fact it wasn't Robert. I don't care that much as long as the character is done justice to, and he mostly was. One of his big problems, though, and this is not Jackie's fault, of course, but, you know, he doesn't look big and intimidating enough. Like, even though Robert was not exactly a big man, he was still, I think, around 6 foot. At least he's taller than most people were, right? So he kind of, and plus they put him in the big engineer boots, so he towered over people by, you know, a couple inches at least, and I'm sure they cast accordingly so he can do that. And this one, he seems to be shorter than everybody, so, and not saying that short people can't be scary and all, it's just that it's not as intimidating, so there is that. But even though Freddy's physicality was never a huge thing about him being scary, you know, it's more like the way he moved around and toyed with you than his, you know, big gruff exterior. But I think Jackie did a really good job in the role here. The makeup looks kind of iffy. I know they went for a more realistic approach, and I can appreciate that.
You one ugly motherfucker.
It does make more sense the way his extremities were burned off and he has a more melted look because, I mean, let's face it, that's how it would really look as opposed to the original makeup. But sometimes it looks really weird, especially it looks really weird when they start like CGIing like the rotten places or the burned out places through his face and all that. That's just kind of lame. And then it'll have some more close-ups and his skin just looks kind of frog-like and doesn't even look like he's burnt or anything. And so it's hit or miss. The glove design's pretty good. And he does wield it pretty effectively, even though he does the spark thing a little too often. It's like, just do it once for effect. You don't need to keep redoing it throughout the movie. But and he does this pretty interesting little thing where, you know, his OCD kicks in or whatever, or his ADD kicks in and he starts going shh with the finger blades, right? So, of all the things that might be wrong with this movie, Jackie Earl Haley's performance is not among them. He's a pretty good Freddy. I would have liked of them. They got rid of more of the humor that they tried to infuse him with for whatever reason and keep him dark and scary. But, you know, it is what it is. So he was not the problem with this movie. There's some pretty cool looking visuals. Some of the dream sequences are all right because they do a very good job of blending like the dream sequence in the real world. Is less of a sometimes you see him actually pass over into it instead of just going to sleep and then waking up into it. Some of that's to do with the micro naps. Like there's a pretty cool scene later on where she's in the pharmacy, Nancy is, and then apparently she's going in and out of consciousness a little bit, and then Freddy's moving closer and closer. and she goes into the boiler room and then out of the boiler room, back in the pharmacy, back and forth. That's kind of a cool little effective scene, and it kind of showcases what they're trying to put across with these micro naps or whatever. So most of the drink sequences look decent, even though there's not a whole lot of variety to some of them. Most of them, once again, are just, subtle different takes on the regular world stuff. Visually, it looks decent, like it's shot decently camera-wise. Nothing too exceptional with the camera angles here. I do like that scene where Chris is in class and she realizes she's sleeping. And she's like, wake up, wake up, wake up. And then it goes, boom, right into this nightmare version of the room. It's all charred and blackened.
Wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up.
You really shouldn't fall asleep in class.
That one's, I think that's pretty cool and pretty effective. That's actually a good use of CG there. There's some pretty poor uses of it, but we'll say more on that later. So it looks decent. Sound, the score is okay. Not enough of the iconic original theme, but it is what it is. Most of them don't have it for some reason. What else is good? I mean, like I said, I can't think of too many other pluses. I know they try to feed upon, Frey's backstory a little bit, but it just kind of falls flat. We know his backstory. You don't need to really see it hashed out in such detail again. We sure don't need to feel sympathy for this guy getting chased through the streets. He's like Frankenstein, but except for he deserved it, Cons. Let's get into cons. Basically, everything else I didn't mention is a con, right? Start with some of the acting. Oh boy, is this a mixed bag of badness. Aside from the aforementioned three people, Jackie Earl Haley, Katie Cassidy, and Thomas Dekker, I didn't like anybody in this. Clancy Brown's even in this to try to add a little pizzazz, and it's nothing. It could have been anybody. It didn't have to be him. Wow. Just wow. Bad. Rooney Mara, if legend has it, she hates horror movies. She did not want to be in this, but she needed the money, right? Look, I got no problem with you earning a paycheck. I understand this. Remember, I got onto Robert Englund for this too, for agreeing to be in bad movies. Doug Bradley of Pinhead fame and Hellraiser finally started saying no after he'd been in enough terrible Hellraiser movies. He's like, they couldn't pay me enough to go do this last one or whatever. Or maybe they could. They just wouldn't come up with enough money. But he finally said no to a script. And what else have you actually seen him in? So eventually an actor's integrity can take over and it's like, I don't need to do this if I don't want to. She didn't have to love the role. She didn't have to like even the work. I don't care if the actor likes what they're doing. It's like the same as an athlete. I don't care if they love the game or not. It doesn't bother me a bit. Go out, earn your paycheck, and just do the best you can with it, even if you don't like it. Well, obviously she did not want to be there because, she's so vacant and vapid and expressionless and undemonstrative. There's a scene where she's walking up to the old orphanage or whatever in a dream sequence, and then Freddy shows up, and she just has this. It's not even during the headlights look, because that looks at least scared. She just got this vacant stare ahead, like she's looking at a green ball for CGI or something,
All grown up.
You're just a nightmare.
That's right. No one can prove I was ever here.
Awful. She phoned it in so completely, and I don't expect someone to be gibbering, terrified, and crying all the time and screaming, but show something. This whole emo attitude that a lot of the teens had in this movie, and it's not just her, is just so lame. They don't look frazzled. The very first guy in the show, what was his name? Dean, I think? He looked frazzled and ragged, He had a couple days beard growth. His hair was kind of all messed up. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked tired, and these other people don't. They have a little bit of smudge under their eyes that the makeup people put on, but they look perfect other than that, it's just, they don't even try. But once again, this is kind of on her. She was meant to carry this movie, and she just doesn't do it. You don't feel any empathy for her. You don't relate to her at all. She's just kind of sitting back and playing on her phone. And in the tub, she's sitting there playing on her phone. And it's like, there's nothing behind anything she's saying. I guess she has a good scream. She screams pretty good twice in this movie, but it takes more than that. So, if you don't want to give the audience what they want, don't take the role. I know you need the money, but don't take it. That's all you have to do is just move on to something else. I think she'd already had some buzz around Hollywood from another movie or whatever. So she could have probably had another choice of roles. Just give the fans what they want, because they will turn on you in a heartbeat, and they rightly did on this movie. So no offense to you personally, I don't know her at all, but if you're going to do this to an iconic role, at least try, even if you don't like the genre. So enough of that. What else is bad? Some really poor CGI in here. They tried. This is the cool thing about Nightmare on Elm Street is this is a series that's made for good CGI, right? Because of all the wacky things they can do in the dream world. You're not limited to the realistic physics and all that of the regular world. But this one didn't have good CGI. They tried to recreate, once again, the iconic scene of Freddy coming out of the wall from the original, right? In the original, it looked freaking amazing. And they did it with a sheet of latex and good lighting. In this one, it just looks horrendous, and it's laughable how bad the CGI is. Just, if you can't redo it right, don't redo it at all, you know? And someone just put a kibosh on that when they saw the dailies or whatever. It's like, oh, this looks awful. They tried to recreate the tub scene to exactly when it's reaching through, you know, up in the tub, and that's kind of shot for shot, kind of lame. I mean, at least with CGI, I guess, right? So just lots of bad CGI, a lot of CGI blood throughout, like the very final kill, that is, of Mom, and just that one looks pretty fake. Cool looking, but fake. Just a lot of that, a lot of bad CGI in this movie. I don't want to get this skit too much longer. What else is a con? Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. Don't make Freddy a sympathetic character. For goodness sake, he's evil incarnate, and he's a child killer, and apparently this one a child molester and all that too. Yet they show him running away from this angry band of parents who eventually torch him. And yes, I do not recommend doing this because, you know, innocent people can get killed. But I'm just saying, they tried to make him sympathetic, and it's a lame way to screw with the audience and a lame way to screw with the character. Leave him ambiguous, leave him evil, and just leave it at that. We don't need any more reason to hate Freddy Krueger or to empathize with him. We want him to be defeated. That's how we, the audience, should feel. Well, we do want to see repeated movies, but I digress. So that was just kind of lame. So that whole reimagining, sort of the backstory was just unnecessary. Cons. The kills weren't all that creative. They could have been much more. Freddy's humor, like I said, was misplaced again. Most of the time he was much darker and more threatening, but he does turn into the kind of sniggering villain. I can almost imagine him twirling his mustache sometimes. It's like, just get to the point. And he does get to the point one time with Jesse's character. He just basically sticks his arm right through him, and then he hangs him upside down, and he starts taunting him and tormenting him a little bit.
Did you know that after the heart stops beating, the brain keeps functioning for well over 7 minutes?
With the iconic, you know, you still have 6 more minutes left to play kind of line.
We got 6 more minutes to play.
But yeah, he's interesting. So I don't know if he's just trying to scare people to build power, but the way they make it sound in this movie is that it's memories, or Nancy's memories, is giving him strength. So who knows? Maybe he's lying. I don't know. There's enough time to think about it. So let's just get down to it. What do I think about this movie? Well, this is another tough one to rate fairly. I'm going to give this 2 out of 5. All right, now hear me out here. I don't think this movie deserves all the hate that it gets. I think a lot of people, once again, regardless of how this movie turned out, would have hated it anyway. Either because Robert wasn't in it, they have a thing against remakes, whatever.
I feel the conflict within you. Let go of your hate.
If you come back at me with more of a, I've actually watched this movie approach, and here's what I didn't like, that I can understand, because there's a lot not to like in this movie. I don't really like this movie, but I don't hate it out of kind, just because it's a remake and Robert's not in it. I appreciate that we got basically a bigger budget remake of the first one. I'd like to see a continuation, maybe its own new story. I don't need to see a rehash of the greatest movie in the franchise, but it is what it is. We got the movie, so I guess we should be thankful for that, but it wasn't good. Say that now. Acting is the biggest crime of this movie for the most part, other than the 3 people I mentioned before. It's just people didn't seem to want to be there, or they were in over their heads, whatever the case may be. Story was kind of lackluster. The dream sequences were okay, but nothing too amazing. Freddy was great for the most part, and I was completely happy with Jackie Earle Haley's performance. If for whatever reason they decided to do another one, I would not mind seeing him doing it again. Finding better actors to be around him would be good. And I know, like I said, I didn't really enjoy this movie that much, and I've had to watch it 3 times now for these clips and all. It's not as bad as some people make out. I've seen worse remakes in my day. If I had to compare this to, say, like the Friday the 13th remake, it's not as good, I'd say, but it's fun on its own merits, I guess. And there's a lot of movies out there I'd rather not watch other than this. I mean, I don't know if that helps any, but so it's just okay. Definitely leaning towards bad, but it's just okay in some spots. And if we could have seen a little more Freddy himself and his full-on Freddy mode, that would have been kind of cool. Some more longer dream sequences. They did seem a little chopped up. It was like, 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there at most, and then we're on back to the real world for 10 minutes. So that part was kind of lame, but so give it a chance if you haven't seen it. I think it's on Netflix. I could be wrong. Maybe on Amazon Prime. I haven't looked, but try not to buy it. I'll say that. Try not to buy it if you can, and try to watch it for free if at all possible. But it's not the worst way to spend. Was it? How many minutes is this? I thought it was 90. It's not going to tell me right here. Usually it's right there, but 95 minutes. Okay. So 95 minutes, there's worse ways to spend an hour and a half, I guess. It's just that this is not like the kind of movie you want to get back in and watch every year. Like the original, I would be happy to put that on anytime and watch it because it's just so effective and good. And this one is just kind of like, you watch it. Maybe I'll watch a decade later to see if I missed something or whatever, but I'm not really in a hurry to watch this again. And so just don't hate it for the wrong reasons. Hate it on its own merits. Don't hate it because of what it doesn't have, i.e., Robert Englund, basically. So that's basically it. If they do remake it, I hope it's a little less slick and polished, a little less... Oh, I forgot to mention the jump scares. That's the biggest con of all.
Is that a fact? That's a fact.
Oh my gosh, how could I forget to put this in there? Sorry, real quick. The jump scares. This movie relies on huge amounts of jump scares and big loud noises. I mean, there's got to be 20 or 30 of them in this stupid movie. Get rid of that. That's the worst trope you can have in a horror movie. Maybe 1 or 2 for the entire movie is fine. Not like 10, 15, 20, 30 of them. Don't do it. Just big, loud, booming noises when someone turns around. It's so cheap and so hack. Don't do that anymore. That was one of the worst parts of this movie. I forgot. I can't believe that slipped my mind. But anyway, so 2 stars out of 5. It's not horrible, but sure ain't good either. So anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more review content coming up in the near future, because if I can review it, I will do it. Don't forget to join the Gene Bank and leave a comment down below. I read and respond to everybody, so let me know what you think. Am I an idiot? Am I actually on something with this movie? Just let me know. I am now officially through the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and I'm going to do a ranking video probably next, and maybe a top 10 Freddy kills like I did with Friday the 13th, and then I'll have to move on to my next horror franchise, which will be announced later, but I think I know the one I'm going to do. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Until next time, this is Genome. Happy to be out of Fredley's Dreamland. Out.